What footage convinces you that paranormal things exist? I'm on mobile and I can never find the episode, but there was one particular episode of Destination Truth that's pretty convincing. It was in a forest in Romania, I think. Anyway, this one investigator got thrown like 200 feet from the middle of a clearing to the tree line. This was a full-grown man with probably 60 to 70 pounds of equipment on him, and he was thrown so fast the camera didn't even pick it up. When they took his coats off, he had these huge gashes on his body that were bleeding, but none of his clothes had been torn. To add to the weirdness, nothing was alive in the clearing at all. It was in an almost perfect circle. I'm hoping someone can find and link the episode, or at least the clip. Could it have been faked? Probably, but I imagine it would be pretty difficult. I could be biased though, because I've had experience with the paranormal, and so I already believe that it was potentially real. Sounds like an interesting episode. Paranormal stuff can get pretty wild, especially with claims like that. The guy getting thrown and not having torn clothes is odd for sure. It raises questions about what really happened. Could be fake, but strange things happen in the forest. The clear circular area adds to the mystery. If anyone knows the episode, it'd be cool to see it again. One of the child life specialists I work with was telling me how on the pediatrics floor, it's a somewhat common occurrence for children to describe deceased children who stayed in the room that they currently occupy, down to like their favorite games to play and just information that they should not have available. A majority part of me shrugs off the paranormal, but a part of me can see that maybe there's some sort of energy left behind by the dead that can carry memories or something. We can't detect or measure it with instrumentation yet, but I get this feeling one day we will, and everyone will be like, holy shit, ghosts kind of exist. That's an interesting perspective. Kids often have a unique way of seeing the world. It's hard to dismiss their experiences completely. The idea of some residual energy or memory makes sense in a way. Science hasn't figured everything out yet, so who knows what we might discover in the future. If those stories keep coming up, it does make you wonder about the nature of consciousness and what happens after. With regards to the third one, I find it difficult to see this as any kind of proof, purely because it's based on one person's perceived experience, and it doesn't allow for things such as hallucinations or the impact of shock/trauma. Too many unknowns with that one. With 1 and 2, I find stuff like that really interesting. I totally believe in coincidence, but sometimes the odds are quite insane. I don't know though. I still tend to just think it's a coincidence. Edit. Good post though. I'm gonna look up the first 2. Seems like you're weighing some interesting thoughts on proof and coincidence. It's true that personal experiences can be subjective. The idea of coincidences often does spark curiosity, especially when the odds feel off. It's reasonable to want to dig deeper into those cases. Looking up the first 2 could lead to some more intriguing insights. Overall, it's good to keep an open mind while also being skeptical. I don't have a link for you as I'm mobile. I'm sure Google will produce one. But they went back for a follow-up on the Now Adults, and they all still stood by what they'd said. Interesting stuff. There doesn't really seem to be an explanation. I don't believe that many children could hold up a lie under the fairly intense scrutiny they received. And there's no benefit to them continuing it into adulthood. I'm sure they would be forgiven for saying it was childish plot for attention. I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on it though. It's interesting that they still stand by their story after so many years. It makes you think about what really happened back then. Children often move on from things, but if they're still consistent, it adds a layer of intrigue. The scrutiny they faced must have been tough, and it's curious why they keep it going without any real gain. I wonder how others feel about it too. When I was a kid, my primary school overlooked a river. One day there was about 100 kids lined up along the fence screaming and crying that these kids were being drowned by an old man. Nothing was happening. It started as a joke from a few kids and escalated into a huge event. Most managed to convince themselves that they actually saw something, pointing to rocks and broken trees as evidence. A similar event happened months later, but involving some people are filming a porno down there. They weren't. That sounds pretty wild. Kids can turn anything into chaos, can't they? Just a small joke escalated into a full-blown panic. The power of suggestion is strong, especially in a big group. The porno rumor is equally ridiculous. Funny how kids can invent these stories without any real substance. It's a strange mix of imagination and fear. What you're talking about is similar to a real psychological phenomenon that forms the basis for guidelines used in questioning children in American courts. Children, and people in general, but especially children, are fantastic where manufacturing memories is concerned. It's surprisingly easy to plant a memory in a child's head. Because of this, you can't ask a kid in court if he or she remembers an explicit event occurring, because memory is terrible and they're seeking approval, so they may as well remember anything happening. Without knowing how much provocation these kids had to conform to a story, the information isn't as solid as it's presented. This highlights how memory can be unreliable, especially in children. They can easily be influenced or coerced into recalling events that may not have happened. It raises questions about how we handle testimony in court and the importance of careful questioning. The emphasis on memory and its malleability is crucial, particularly in legal settings where accuracy is vital. Overall, it's a complex issue worth considering. My grandfather told me this story. In the 50s in rural Switzerland, it was very rare for anyone to own a TV or have contact with any sort of pop culture. One day, while at the local BI's, which is like a bar to drink beer and stuff, one of the older farmers comes inside and asks for something strong. The guy is shaking and can't talk coherently. My grandfather and several of his friends ask the guy what happened, and he tells them this story. He was sleeping under a tree when a weird airplane descended and landed in one of his fields. He woke up with the noise and saw it land. So he walked to the place where it had landed and saw two tiny men with silver suits come outside and observing the dirt on the floor. Shocked, he yelled, and when the two tiny men saw him, they went inside the airplane and flew away. So, this was the story of a simple farmer that never had any contact with pop culture or had any access to TV and claimed to have seen what we now call UFOs and aliens. That's an interesting story. A farmer in the 50s experiencing something like that sounds pretty wild. It's strange to think of someone who's never seen pop culture suddenly encountering what he believed were aliens. The whole vibe of rural Switzerland back then, mixed with a UFO sighting, adds a unique twist. It makes you wonder how things like that were perceived at the time. People must have thought he was really out there. There was a pilot of the famous state Route 71 spy plane who did an AMA here on Reddit a year or two ago. I asked him, on another account, if he had ever seen anything he thought was a UFO and definitely not another aircraft. I assumed he would not answer me because I assume people like that are told by superiors what to say, etc., or I assumed he might be afraid to harm his credibility or something. But he actually replied and said he had in fact seen things that are no way from Earth. Wish I could find the post. That's interesting. A pilot from a well-known spy plane sharing something like that would definitely grab attention. It's not every day you hear someone in that position talk about UFOs. Makes you wonder what else is out there if someone with his background is saying that. The fact that he responded at all is pretty unusual. It adds a layer of credibility to the whole UFO discussion. I read this article, which unfortunately I didn't bookmark as I can't seem to find it again, but it was about this non-public section of the French catacombs that supposedly had all these corpses dressed in clothes of the period and still fairly well preserved, and this photographer was allowed in to photograph it. I don't think it was an area you could easily illegally get into. It reminded me a bit of the pictures I've seen of the Capuchin Crypt in Palmero, except different because it was all photographed in low light and less arranged and more natural. It was supposedly where the more well-off people buried their dead. If anyone knows of the link I'm describing, that would be neat. That sounds interesting. The French catacombs have a lot of history, and the idea of a less accessible area filled with well-preserved corpses is kind of eerie. The contrast with the Capuchin Crypt adds a unique perspective. It's a shame you didn't bookmark it, though. Those types of articles can be hard to find. Hopefully, someone can help you track it down. I couldn't make out much of what he was saying, but I heard him say leave several times, and oh God, Also, I think he said enough at the beginning. Something about the car while his was backing away. At 2:31 he says, "Where is he?" At 1:23 he asks if the car stopped, and immediately after he screams, "Reverse! Reverse!" in English, which leads me to believe he's not alone in the car. Either that or he's talking to himself. It's hard to tell what he's saying because it sounds like he has something covering his mouth. Honestly, I think he sounds terrified, almost like he's crying. It looks fake, but the guy's reaction was very genuine, I think. Seems like a tense situation. The repeated words suggest panic, like he's really on edge. Hearing "reverse" adds to the urgency. It could be a real moment of fear, even if the overall scene looks staged. It's interesting how emotions can come across even without clear audio. Overall, definitely a lot happening there, even if it's hard to fully grasp. Zoom in, enhance, 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 zoom in, enhance. Yep, humans reflected in the dog's eyes. That's an interesting take. The repetitive zooming in is kind of odd though. It makes you think about what we're really seeing. The idea of reflection adds a layer to it. Dogs can show a lot about us, I guess. Simple but worth a thought. The thing about Destination Truth is that they were out there to debunk things, and they're the only show I know of that didn't find something 99% of the time. When they did find something, they would test it and find out what it was, and 99% of the time it was something mundane, and they would tell the audience that it was something mundane like chicken blood or the like. Most of the episodes would end with the host Josh Gates saying, "We caught some stuff on EVPs, but that doesn't really prove anything, and we heard some stuff, but that doesn't prove anything. So this one is debunked." Hell, the show ran for 5 seasons and had 55 episodes, and they only found 2 pieces of evidence in all of that time that they couldn't explain. I don't think they were faking things for ratings at all. I, to this day, think it's the only paranormal type show ever to not fake anything or find anything. Destination Truth had a unique approach. Most shows hype up the paranormal, but they focused on debunking. It's interesting how they mostly found just ordinary explanations for their investigations. Josh Gates had a straightforward style, often closing episodes without definitive proof. After 5 seasons and only 2 unexplained pieces of evidence, it says a lot about their honesty. They really didn't seem to chase ratings with fake encounters. "Unfortunately, I got stuck on the earth for rather longer than I intended," said Ford. "I came for a week and got stuck for 15 years. But how did you get there in the first place then?" "Easy. I got a lift with a teaser." "A teaser?" "Yeah. Air, what is a teaser?" Teasers are usually rich kids with nothing to do. They cruise around looking for planets which haven't made interstellar contact yet and buzz them. Buzz them? Arthur began to feel that Ford was enjoying making life difficult for him. "Yeah," said Ford, "they buzz them. They find some isolated spot with very few people around, then land right by some poor unsuspecting soul whom no one's ever going to believe, and them strut up and down in front of him wearing silly antennae on their head and making beep-beep noises. Rather childish, really. It's just a typical story of being stuck somewhere longer than planned. Forgot a lift from some rich kids, which seems silly. They mess with people for fun, wearing goofy stuff and making noises. Not sure why anyone would do that, but I guess some folks enjoy messing with others. It's kind of weird how some people find amusement in these things." Acoustics are my favorite spooky thing. Did you know that if there is something that makes a low enough tone, it can create a standing wave in a room? There's a great story about a haunted warehouse where people would report feeling like someone was standing behind them near the center of the room, and when they looked with their peripheral vision, they could see a dark shadow, but when they turned their head or moved their body, the shadow disappeared. There were a couple of large fans providing air to the room. One of the fans was spinning at just the right frequency to create a standing wave in the middle of the room, meaning the air in that one specific location was not moving. Your ears can detect the difference between that and moving air, even if you may not be aware of it. So your subconscious is suddenly aware that there is something in the middle of the room, blocking the air, and once that happens, your brain just decides to tell your vision that it sees something there too. But as soon as you look at it, your eyes update your brain, and it realizes that nothing is there at all. That's an interesting take on acoustics and perception. It's curious how our senses can play tricks on us like that. The idea of a standing wave creating a ghost effect is pretty neat. Makes you think about how much our environment influences our experiences without us even realizing it. The connection between sound and sight is something we might not consider often. Definitely gives a new perspective on spooky stories.